Today, my guest is fashion portrait photographer Barbara Bordnick. Barbara's won numerous awards for her photography and for filmmaking and has served as the president of the ASMP and Advertising Photographers in New York. So welcome, please, one of the original Canon explorers of light, Barbara Bordnick. How are you
Thank
today?
you. It's always so embarrassing, isn't it? I'm good, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. And
Yeah.
it's nice to see some people I haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, so I guess we start out with the obvious, the isolation, the pandemic. How are we holding up in this?
Well, it hasn't, I'm fortunate
Mm-hmm.
because first of all, I live alone and I have a large place, so I'm not roaming around in a one-room apartment. Um, and I have a garden out back where I grew herbs over the whole thing, and it's actually a deck. Um, but it's been frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it's and it hasn't made me work as much as I wish it had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I walked around when it first started, not when it first started, because I didn't leave the house for almost 3 months, um, and except to go outside the back. But when I first started walking around, I just started photographing, my city, my neighborhood, all boarded up, um, stores closed permanently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was very sad. You must see that, Paul. Um, yeah, it's incredibly sad. So that's what I did at first, and then that was depressing, so I stopped doing that. But this area, since I live right near Union Square, is looks like it's normal at this
Mm-hmm.
point. Um, so, but I think the so much has happened because of the pandemic. So much has happened that I think would not have happened if we didn't have the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
like the demonstrations and what people have asked for. Oh, there's a lot of reckoning going on during the pandemic, and so that's been interesting to see. I think the most frustrating part for me was that I couldn't demonstrate. I have never sat by and watched protests, never.
Wow.
And the fact that I couldn't join in was very frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are you able to work at all? I mean, are there any assignments coming out on are people doing anything?
No,
No.
I mean, I sold a photograph. That's
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Wow.
But I haven't done. I don't do very many assignments anyway,
Mm-hmm.
anymore. Um, and actually, what I've been mostly interested in lately, in the past few years, is trying different applications of my work. I was doing silk screen and yeah, so I'm trying some different things
Sure.
that
So
I'm
let's
not ready to talk about because I don't know what I'm doing.
doing. Let's talk about early days. I mean, who inspired you? What lured you into photography in the '60s as a woman, especially?
Well, it's interesting. I'm completely self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
I was a fashion design student at Pratt Institute. And I remember one day I was with a classmate and we were looking at Harper's Bazaar and we were saying how beautiful it was. And I realized at one point that she was talking about the fashion and I was talking about the photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the first time I really saw photographs. I was not at all interested in photography until then. I took one photo class. All they taught you was how to load a Nikon camera, how to load a reel to develop, and how to take a light reading, which frankly, I'm not sure I know much more right now. But and all of that is useless. So what's the point? Um, but and then when I got out of school, I was married, and when I got out of school, we went to Europe, and my husband worked there. So I was trying to get work as an assistant, but I didn't speak the language. I worked in Copenhagen for like a couple of days. But the interesting thing about that is that in Copenhagen, I got my work published for some unbelievable reason, the stuff I did in school. And so I thought it was going to be easy to be published. And so then we were in Paris for And then I came back to New York, and that's when the trouble started
Okay.
because then I was looking for work and nobody hired girls.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I was, hardly a girl, I was a woman. And it's hard to believe, I know, but I was very shy. I don't know if shy would be the word, but I was very reserved. Um, and I wasn't really good and I didn't know anybody in the field. I had absolutely no connections. So I was just walking around and trying to see as many photographers as I could. And finally, uh, I mean, it's a long story, but finally, someone hired me. Someone asked if I would help him for no money. He had a studio in the Bowery, um, and I worked for him for 6 months, mostly in the darkroom.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that I learned working for him is all I knew. And then I started my own studio because we had a house on Fifth Avenue, and we started a studio there. And I was incredibly lucky because um, one day Harper's Bazaar called me. Well, I went to see them. In those days, you could take a portfolio up to see somebody, you didn't have to drop it off. And one day they called me. And, what can I say? Everybody knows once you're in Harper's Bazaar, you have nothing to worry about. And I have some of the work from there, actually. I brought some.
Yeah, do you want to start sharing your screen and talk about some of the work?
Sure, sure. Let me just open this.
Barbara, when you joined in on protests, did you take a camera with you and shoot photographs?
Never. It's really interesting because I, I was never a person to carry a camera around. And now that I'm older, I hate carrying a camera. Um, the only time I ever actually took a camera with me on vacation was what I think the first time was, I mean, I had a camera when I lived in Paris and when we traveled. But the first time I really seriously took a camera with me was when I went to Africa. So this was the first photographs I did for Bazaar. Um, and interestingly enough, um, I was most influenced by Bill Brandt, by photographs he did of miners in Ireland. Um, I have no idea why, but I saw a photograph of his that made me think of this. It had nothing to do with this. The only thing that is the same as was in his photograph is the bicycle on the left. And then this was, I had a farm upstate, and this was up there. And this too. Of course, no one has come up with a better prop than a cigarette yet. And this was for Lears. I worked for Lears since the beginning of the magazine. It was a magazine for the woman who wasn't born yesterday, is what Francis Lear said. And the editor was China Machado, who was, fantastic. This was for my favorite client. That's why I put it in. It was Dayton's Minneapolis, Dayton Hudson. And this was done there.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to do the shooting there. It was a nightmare, mixing all these different lights. But I went first to test them out. This was Lears again.
Yeah, did you
The-
prefer to work, did you prefer working in the studio or going out on location?
Um, I liked both. When I first started, I preferred location.
Mm-hmm.
I like both. If the situation is, it's more complicated working, of course, on location. Um, but if I know a place I want to shoot, then I mean, I love it. Uh, yeah, I think it really depends on the system. This was for the New York Times Sunday magazine. They used to give me the Japanese clothes because I love them.
Mm-hmm.
This was for Canon.
Yeah, you were one of
Actually,
the early adopters of the digital.
yeah, actually, it started with, I was one of the first for a lot of things. But I'll talk about it when we get to flowers. This is another thing. Polaroid came to me and asked if I would be interested in trying their 8x10 film. And I loved Polaroid. It's interesting because lots of women fashion photographers love Polaroid. And so I said yes, but I didn't know it was 8x10. You're talking, you know, you're talking to a person who knew 35 millimeter. I didn't even shoot medium format.
Interesting.
So they said, and they were great. I mean, they were such a great client.
And this was
Um,
the Women in Jazz project?
yeah, and they said, you know, just get an assistant who can show you how to use the camera. So rent a camera. So they gave me a camera, and I learned how to use it. I used to I used to push the tripod forward, you know, to get if I wanted to get closer. And my assistant would lean over and say, you know, you can do that on the camera.
Rack that
But
front
eventually
standard.
I learned, yeah, eventually I learned how to use it. These are two of the, so I decided to do a calendar of great women in jazz.
Hmm.
And it was a great project, really wonderful project. And it was shot 8x10. Then I continued doing my portraiture in 810.
What year
And
was
this is,
this approximately?
oh God, why did you ask me that?
Someone
I
asked in the
can't,
chat.
oh, this photograph
Well, no,
or
the previous, the Women in
the
Jazz.
jazz calendar was 1979.
Okay, that was the year I discovered large format too. I went to
Yeah.
work in a catalog studio in New York and we shot 11 by 14 to size.
I loved shooting 8x10. Nobody was shooting 8x10 for portraiture back then.
Yeah.
Avedon was in medium format, but it requires so much light, and my studio isn't really that big,
Hmm.
um, but I love doing it. So this was Jay Maisel, and the story behind this photograph is very funny because Jay and I were very close friends then, and American photographer asked me if I would do a photograph of him. So he came here, and Jay is extremely photogenic, as any of you that know him knows. Um, you almost can't take a bad photograph of him. Plus, he has beautiful hands, which to me are very important. And excuse me. And so, you know, he's sitting there, and then finally, I said, when I thought we had it, he said, I was good, right? I was really good. I mean, I behaved myself. And I looked at him and I said, you were the most controlling son of a bitch I've ever had in front of my camera. And this is what he did. And I wouldn't let them have it unless they would put it on the cover. I called, I said, I have a great photograph for you, but it's got to be a cover. Sean said, no, this isn't a cover story. I said, then you can't have it. Anyhow, it was a cover story. It's in the film behind him.
Yeah.
Whenever he's at his desk,
I don't know
it's
if
on
it's
the
in the
wall.
film or on the DVD's outtakes, but there is a story about this where you talk about it. This
Yeah,
photograph.
well, the image itself, the cover, is
Hmm.
on the wall behind him.
I'll have to go watch that again.
Yeah, me too, as a matter of fact. And so this is more 8x10 portraiture. That's John Lowengard on the
Hmm.
left. That was, talk about an intimidating shoot, but he was great, really great. And on the right is Marion Post Walcott, probably one of my most intimidating shootings ever, because she's just an amazing photographer. She's from the Farm Security Administration, and I didn't know very much about her. Um, and at that point, when I did the jazz project, Anita O'Day was a nightmare.
Hmm.
Um, she came in and said, do you want to pose like this? You want me to pose like that? I mean, it was a nightmare. And she came with a guy, I think it was her drummer. And I couldn't get, you know, I couldn't get him out of the way. So, and that's the one shot I hate on the calendar, except I shouldn't, because it's really exactly what she looked like.
Yeah.
So anyway, I decided that no one ever would come on the set when I was doing a portrait. No one, ever, ever.
Hmm.
And so when Marion Post Walcott came, she came with her husband, and we put him up front in the studio where I am. There's a seating area over there. We put him up front, and I was photographing her, and I was so intimidated that I said, you know, how am I going to control this? So I I went up front and I went to her husband and I said, would you come with me, please? And I took it to the back. And I used to sit next to the 8x10. I used to sit right next to the lens when I would shoot. I would focus. My assistants would handle the film
holders.
holders. Yeah. And I would sit up front with a cable release right next to the lens, which is interesting because it created a completely different dynamic than any other format I've shot. And it has nothing to do with the format. It has to do with where I sat and my interaction with the subjects. So I told him to sit very close to me. I put a stool next to me. And I looked at her and I said, tell me what you love about this man. And that was her face. And that was the shot.
Wonderful.
So I've not done that again. This, of course, this is Angela Lansbury's favorite picture. This was when she was in Sweeney Todd.
I have to leave.
Okay, Michael,
Bye.
do well in your test. We'll be thinking of you.
Thank you.
Yes,
I love you,
good luck.
Barbara. Great.
I love you too.
Give him hell.
I'll leave some for you. So this was when she was in Sweeney Todd, and this was for Life magazine, also Polaroid. And
What did you say?
pardon?
I didn't
Somebody
get that
asked-
either. Let's just continue.
Yeah. So this was 8x10 Polaroid, and this is a whole story, which if you want to know, I can tell you later. Photographing her. I mean, I learned, it's amazing what you learn about yourself. When, you know, like anything, when you work with other people in any context, for any reason, you always learn just as much about yourself. I teach, and if I don't learn as much as my students by the end of the semester, I consider it a failure. This is Brian Cox. He was in a play, I can't remember the name of it. He was in a play that he won a Tony for. And we went up to the theater to photograph him. And so he took us on the roof. He said he had permission to take us there. And so this was the photograph I took right before they chased us off the roof. But I photographed him in the studio also. And I have wonderful photographs of him in the studio because his face is such an incredible sculpture. It has such texture and volume to it, and nooks and crannies. He's incredible to photograph. Plus, he's a wonderful actor. This is she's a performer. She's an actor comedian, and all of those photographs she's holding, those are all my photographs of all the characters that she plays. And so when I did a portrait of her, I thought, I couldn't figure out what I would do of her. She's beautiful, and that was going to be boring. So I thought, well, maybe we should dress you in all your characters. And so that's what we did. And she's struggling here to hold that up, but she was beautiful. That was a great shoot.
Yeah.
This is the story of my mom and dad. They were in New York for my brother's wedding, his second wedding. And of course, they lived in Florida. And I knew I had photographed my mother for Life magazine. And I love that photograph. I had photographed my father and I hated the photograph. And so we were set up for a Saks shooting in black and white. And so I said, you know, I might not ever have them here again when I'm set up for a shoot. And so I said, come on, let's go back. And I said to my mother, Mom, you've got to help me with him. Don't let him just stand there. And so in this photograph, my mother is actually goosing my father. So, but this photograph, it's actually one of my favorite photographs. And I got more offers for this photograph, to use this photograph.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat though. Was this cropped or did you shoot this square or?
This is full frame. I never crop. Whatever I see in, you know, I consider that the what you see when you look through the lens is your canvas, and you are responsible for absolutely everything on it. And so I really, I mean, maybe I've cropped, something that got in the way that I couldn't get rid of in a corner or something. But no, I compose everything in the camera.
Great.
So this wasn't cropped. Um, and so anyway, I made more money on this photograph than any other photograph I've ever done. It was a billboard. It was poster signs in phone booths. It was for an insurance company. It was a lot of things. But the interesting thing was, people wanted me to do this for them, and you can never repeat something. But one client called up and said, we have a job, and we'd like to know if you would do that photograph. We want exactly that photograph, but he would be holding a flower. So I said, well, you're never going to get that photograph because that photograph is life. But I'm happy to talk to you. And then I asked my parents if they wanted to come and do the photograph. And they were in their 80s already. And so I was really nervous because art directors can be really impossible. They can just make you shoot till you want to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very nervous, but they were great. And my parents were, they didn't understand why the shooting was already over. And the art director and the copywriter went back to their office, and they were so in love with my mother and father that they created an ad campaign for Rose and Morris. That's Rose and that's Morris. So it was for an anti-hypertension drug. Oops. That was the first one, Rose and Morris at the pool. This one I love. They've never played a moment of golf in their lives, but they were so good at it. And of course, it was so wonderful to give them the attention that I gave people. They had clothes made for them. They had hair and makeup. My parents didn't know anything. It was wonderful to have an opportunity to work with them and show them what I do. Then they created a campaign called Rose and Morris Travel Around the World and Send Their Daughter Barbara Postcards. This campaign went on for 3 years. Here they are in Paris. This is my favorite one, Beijing. So that was, it was one of the joys of my life to do, interestingly enough. They're not great photographs, they're silly photographs,
Mm-hmm.
but it was such a fun
They have a
campaign
lot of
to
meaning.
do. Yeah, and they got paid very well. So that was another thing.
Wow.
They hadn't paid income tax in so long. They've been retired. When I was shooting 8x10, I really wanted to do some 8x10 nudes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shot a couple of black and white nudes.
Very nice.
Then digital. Leaf came to me and asked if I would be interested in trying their digital back. And I said, sure. And so I did a portrait of someone, which I don't have here, but, and I loved it. And so I kept trying to get them to give me the equipment, not give it to me, to lend me the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And, I couldn't get a deal with them. So Graphis, I was having a lunch with the art director of Graphis and publisher. And he was going on about how he loved what was happening with digital. And I said to him, if you publish something that I do, I bet I could get the equipment. And so that's exactly what happened. And I decided, since it was this leaf back only did black and white, it's before they even had color. And so I decided I wanted to do something very classical, black and white, in this new technology. So I did a series of nudes of Alvin Ailey dancers.
The hands and arms are so expressive.
Yeah, aren't they? That's why I wanted to do it, because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a photo. What I wanted was the lyricism of the body, and you can't get more than with, what better can you get than with a dancer?
Yeah, and we
So,
talked a little bit previously about fingers and making sure they're in the
oh
shot.
yeah, I think that I really think that well, especially when you do portraits, I think that that hands and eyes tell you the most. Um, for me, they're the most important things in a photograph. Meaning, also, should the hands be in or should they be out?
Hmm.
But never crop them and never take them for granted. Um, the the flowers was a funny thing how that happened because uh, as an explorer, they had the prototype of the first SLR digital camera, Canon did. And so they were passing it around, and we each had it for like 4 hours or something. And so the camera came to me, and I didn't have the model because I forgot to book her. And so I'm right near the Union Square Market, and I almost always had flowers here. And so I just picked up a flower, and I was really angry at myself. And I said, let's just shoot this damn thing. So we went in the back and we set up the lighting and we shot. And I took a shot. This is the cover of my first book. I took the shot on the left. And I looked at it and I said, you know, everything always looks so good on these little LED readouts. And so I took another one, and that was the one on the left. And then I said, you know, let's put this in the computer because I've never seen anything like this before. And so we did. And no one was shooting flowers like that. Everybody was shooting flowers on a black background, very literally. And this to me was a landscape I had never seen. And I started shooting flowers, and I have 3 books of flower photographs.
They're beautiful.
Thank you. That's the second book,
Hmm.
the cover of the second book. Oh, I
Was that last one in black and white, or is that just muted colors?
um, no, it's not black and white. It's
Hmm.
full color.
Well,
Can you see the brown
yes, I
really
see it.
clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, that's. I happen to. My last book was white. Um,
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, the covers of my book are red, white, and blue, or red, blue, and white, I should say. Um, I always wanted to. It was the white flowers that really, really hypnotized me. I was just enchanted with them, and so I begged my publisher to do a third book, white flowers, and so we did. Um, this was not in any of the books,
Hmm.
nor was uh, I can't go back. Yeah, nor was this one.
This is one of my favorites.
Mine too. It was after the books.
Hmm.
I kept shooting flowers. I still shoot flowers. Um,
But do you have another book available though? Did you
oh, I
mention?
do. I do. I have a limited edition of 40 copies, numbered and signed and numbered, of 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 flowers that were in none of my books. I did this limited edition. It's really beautiful. I don't have a copy of it here. I can get one. At any rate, it's $250, and I have. Did I sent you the ad for it? Didn't I?
No, I didn't see that.
I sent it today. I
Okay,
have it.
I'll look.
I can put it up. I can put it up afterwards. Um, yeah, and it's beautiful. It was printed in Germany, and it's really an exquisitely produced book. Um,
Very nice.
yeah. So, and of course, my books are still. I have books to sell too. If you want a signed book. This was the cover of the third book, the whites,
Hmm.
and this was in the white book. You can see why I love white. This photograph was 9/11 happened, September 11th, 2001. I taught that day, and I teach at Parsons. So I was walking right towards the World Trade Center. and I saw the whole thing.
Wow.
And I came back and I told my assistant and I went to the hospital to try and give blood or whatever they needed. Of course, they didn't need anything. There were no survivors. So 2 days later, we were cleaning up the studio, and I had these flowers, and we were going to throw them out. And I held them up, and I looked at them, and I said, "Quick, set up. I want to shoot this," because it reminded me of when the first building fell and the second one was falling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called this, it was the last photograph in my first book, and it's called September 11, 2001. It makes me sad even just looking at it.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's that.
So it looks like a lot of your photographs are produced as opposed to someone who goes out and finds photographs. You're not a street photographer, are you?
Not a street photographer. No,
Me,
I'm not
me
a street
neither.
photographer. Never have been. And when I try it, I'm really bad at it because I can't control enough. Even flowers. I never shoot flowers in situ. That's not, never is not the right word. If
But
I have shot 3 amazing flowers in situ, because the situation was perfect.
mhm.
But I don't want anything interfering. I don't want photographs in soft focus in the background. I think those photographs are beautiful when people do them, but for me, photographing flowers is a very, very Zen experience. And it's very important that I'm alone with the flower and that I explore all the landscapes
Mhm.
therein. In fact, the books, the flowers are all titled in Latin, in their Latin names. I didn't want any names on the flowers, but my publisher said, you can't do that. You have to say what the flowers are. Because for me, it wasn't about flowers. The books, the name was Searchings, and they forced me to put flowers in the name. So it's called Searchings, Secret Landscapes of Flowers. That was the most I would give in, because I didn't want it to be a flower book. I had one of the exhibitions I had was at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, which is a beautiful place. And it reminds me of when I lived in Paris and I used to walk around the Jeu de Paume behind these little old ladies, and they would be talking about what it was like to model for Picasso and and all those photographers, all those painters. And it was fascinating to listen to them talk about their experiences modeling for them. I was at the museum, and there were these 2 little old ladies, and I was walking around behind them, and one says, I like the whole flower. So, you can't please everybody.
Sure.
But that's not what it was about for me. It was very specific. I think my flowers are just like my nudes, and I think my nudes are just like my fashion.
Mhm.
And my portraits. My portraits are very personal. They're my definition of a portrait, which has nothing to do with anybody else's portraiture, is if you have an experience with your subject, an intimate experience that is so authentic that when anybody looks at the photograph, they're sure they were there. That to me is a successful portrait.
Wow. Yeah, I guess it comes down to the question of photography being a product or a process. I mean, where do you get the most out of it? The final product or the interaction with the flower or with the person? Um,
Well, it's interesting because I love the doing, especially
mhm.
especially portraits. I love the doing, but a photograph isn't finished until you printed it. I mean,
Exactly.
there are decisions that get made all along the way, from the camera to the print,
Yeah.
and so I think that really there are 2 different experiences. I think the reason that I kept up with the flowers was I at that point I lived in the studio. I was so excited about that project that I would get up in the middle of the night and come downstairs and print. Because one of the things I loved about digital was I no longer had to deal with labs and
Mhm.
dealing with them correcting my color, which was wrong.
Mhm.
I didn't want them, they were used to guys like Kodak color, real red, real blue, and they were used to that. I say that because I know I'm talking about fashion photographers. If you think of, Deborah Turbeville and Sarah Moon, none of us like straight color.
Mhm.
I always liked a red to the right of red or blue just to the left of blue. And so that's why I love Polaroid, because Polaroid had nothing to do with Kodak color. Um, and so I was happy to be able to control the colors myself,
Yeah.
um, and not try to,
Yeah. I'm
and then
I
I
did-
had, yeah.
yeah, I
So
enjoyed the switch to digital myself, but I just worry now that people aren't printing. I mean, where are their photos
yeah,
going? How are they going to pass them on to next generation?
I know. I'm dealing with that a lot because I gave my prints, my vintage prints, I gave to the people I worked with.
Hmm.
I always gave the hairdresser one and the model one and all that, and I never much printed for myself. And those that I did, I often sold. So I don't have many black and white prints of my work. And I have a dark room, believe it or not, but it's
Hmm.
storage at the moment. Who knows? I can't get rid of it because I keep thinking that one day maybe I'll want to go back. You see, if I had a dark room set up and ready, that's what I would have been doing over the pandemic.
Sure. Sure.
That's what I would have been doing.
Do you do
But
any
I did
digital
do some
printing?
printing. Yes, I do, on a Canon printer. But
Hmm.
you know, uh, Canon didn't. They, I can't print on in the new Photoshop. I have to freeze. It's a whole long story.
Okay.
That's the stuff about digital that I absolutely hate. I think it is such an unbelievable racket
Hmm.
that we are constantly having to go from one thing to the other, and they never back consider anything.
Yeah.
And so I have a $4,000 printer here, and I'm not going out to buy another one of those. I'm just not.
Hmm.
When I can no longer use it, I won't be printing. I'm just not going to do it, unless somebody wants to give me a printer.
Hmm.
So I think it's just
Yeah,
outrageous.
more than the printer give you the inks.
Yeah, right. Well, exactly. They could give a printer to everybody in America and they
Hmm.
wouldn't lose a cent
Right.
because all their money's on inks. But I I swear every once in a while I swear I'm going to go back to film, but I don't. But I just hate this obsolescent racket of obsolescence, I should
Sure.
say, because when we started as photographers, you needed a camera and maybe a couple of lenses. I mean, when I started, I didn't understand why people had more than one lens, more than one camera. I couldn't imagine.
Mhm.
So one day I was starting, did any people here, did you know Marty Forsher, who Marty
Sure, on
Forsher was?
48th Street.
Right, professional camera
Professional
repair.
camera repair. Yep.
Right. He was a miracle. When I started shooting 8x10, I called him up. I said, Marty, I told him about the project I got. He said, congratulations, that's fabulous. I said, Marty, the image is upside down. I said, I said, you do everything. I said, can you turn this right side up for me? And he knew me and he said, Barbara, he said, stick with it for a while. And I promise you, if you can't do it, if you hate it, I'll turn it right side up for you. And I got used to it. But it was, I forgot the point I was trying to make. Um, you had asked me, I forgot the point I was trying to
That's
make.
okay.
Oh, yes, it was about why photographers had more than one camera.
Hmm.
So I was on location for a client, and I was on what we used to call Welfare Island, which is now called Roosevelt Island.
Hmm.
Um, and I was doing a fashion shoot there. And I had 4 shots to do, and suddenly my camera didn't work. And here I am, and I don't have another camera. And I'm in the middle of this shooting. I have two models there, and I'm like totally freaking out. And I'm trying to fix the camera. My husband, it was so early on, my husband was assisting me. And I gave him, he's an industrial designer. I figured he could fix anything. Nothing. We couldn't do anything. And I looked at the counter, and the counter said 20. And I remembered one thing my photo teacher said: never blame Kodak for anything. It's always you, it's never Kodak. And so I looked at the camera again, and I just said, prayed that Kodak made a mistake and put one roll of 20 in a brick of 36.
Mm-hmm.
And I unrolled the film really slowly, holding my breath, and it was a roll of 20.
Wow.
I went back to New York and bought 3 camera bodies and lots of lenses. But that's how inexperienced and naive I was when I started. I mean, I would turn down jobs because I didn't know how to do them. And then when I joined ASMP, every photographer in New York was a member because we were trying to form a guild.
Mm-hmm.
So all the photographers except for
Penn.
Penn and
Avedon.
Avedon. And so I met all these photographers, and a lot of them knew me because they did the still lifes for a lot of projects I did the fashion for. So anyway, so I got to know people, and they said to me, don't ever turn down a job if you can't do it. Just call me, I'll tell you how to do it. And they used to send me their Hasselblads and suitcases. That was a very, very important association for me. It was very important association at that time period. The photographers were incredible. I mean, Philippe Halsman and Jean-Milly and all those old timers. They were amazing.
I still think of them as contemporaries.
Yeah, right. Well, Cornell Kappa called me. I had just come back from Yugoslavia for a shooting, for a 3-week shoot. And the client wanted the film, so I didn't even get enough sleep. And I was so jet lagged. And he said, I'd like you to come to, ICP was doing something called Venezia Settantanove. And it was a series of workshops in 1979. And Philippe Halsman was supposed to do one, and he was sick. So he asked me if I would do it. And I said, I kept saying, I can't, Cornell, I can't. I'm like, I can't, I'm cross-eyed, I can't even see. Anyhow, finally, I get a phone call, and it was Philippe. Oh, Barbara, I'm so happy that you're going to, that was it. So I went, and amazingly, the first day of the workshop, Philippe died.
Oh.
He was really sick. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Yeah. So, so that's my connection to Philippe Halsman. So
Yeah, I
does
love his
anybody have
jump
any
book.
questions?
Barbara, you mentioned that there was a story to your shoot and photograph of Angela Lansbury. What is that story?
Well, I had shot Angela. I knew her brother, who was a Broadway. She had twin brothers. One was a Broadway producer, and one was a Hollywood producer. And so he introduced me to her, and I photographed her just for her and me. And then when Life asked me to do the photograph, I said, I will only do it if you let me do a character study of her character on 8x10. So they said, all right, the photograph of my mother that I did for them was 8x10 also. So I called Angela and told her, and she said, and I said, we're going to do it 8x10. And she said, really? And then she called me back in a day, and she says, Barbara, that's so slow. Do you think that's really good? And I told her, I said, what I want to do is develop the character. So I want you to come as the character. And so she called me, and I said, no, it'll be fine, Angela, it'll be fine. And she called me about 3 times before the shoot, worried about the process, that she wouldn't be able to be spontaneous because it was so slow, because we changed it. We were really fast, I must say. We were really fast on this. If I had tons of film holders, lots of film, because Polaroid was, working with me. And I had 3 assistants on the camera and the machine. Um, but still, so she came and she was in the dressing room, and I went over to the dressing room to, just see how things were going. And she looked at me and she says, "Barbara, darling, what exactly do you want from me?" And I muttered some inarticulate bullshit. And she said, "Oh," like really bad. "Oh." And so I walked to the farthest end of my studio, to the corner, and I'm standing there like this. "You have got to come up with something. You have got to tell her something." And finally, I had no idea what I was going to tell her. So I started walking back to the dressing room. And this happens to me often with light bulbs going off. And I got to the doorway and I got it. And I said, "I know what we're going to do, Angela." And she said, "What?" I said, "You are visiting as, what was the name of the character? Um, I can't think of the name of the character now, but let's say it was Mrs. Hopkins.
Mhm.
You are visiting as Mrs. Hopkins. Angela Lansbury is not here. If there's a phone call for Angela Lansbury, they have to ask for you." And that was it. And she stayed in character, and I have, I think, 65 8x10s, one more incredible than the other,
Wow.
of Angela.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
really. So that's the story of that.
Uh-huh. I
And
know
I got that, yeah, I got that from directing,
Mm-hmm.
because
So you've
yeah,
done film too.
yeah, I did. Again, the first woman from creative to do television commercials
Mm-hmm.
for JCPenney, and we were nominated for Clio's for them. But it was really before there was any fashion in television, because fashion at that time, what people don't realize is fashion at that time was a manufacturing situation. There were no fashion designers. It wasn't until licensing when the fashion designers became enormously wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then in America, if you're really, really wealthy, we'll call you a designer. So then we had Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren. I worked with Ralph Lauren when he was a stylist.
Wow.
And so, and same thing with Perry Ellis. But so it was, um, it was, uh, it, it was difficult for those houses to be able to afford television. So the only people that were doing television were like Sears and the stores, or Cotton Council.
Mm-hmm.
But JCPenney came to me, and because I had done an ad campaign for them with 6 women. There weren't many fashion photographers who would agree to shoot 6 women in an ad, and they were beautiful. And so the art director said, "I've canceled the whole production. I want you to do it." I knew nothing about film. It was like the 8x10 camera.
Sure.
I knew nothing about film. And I said, "You're crazy." He took me to dinner 5 nights in a row until I finally said, "Well, there's one thing I know, that if I can't do it, nobody else can, because nobody's doing fashion in television."
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was I disassembled the photograph, and I choreographed the models walking in, and they had, choreographed movements, and the end frame was the print ad. They were beautiful.
Yeah.
They were beautiful. Yeah, but then when I tried to, then I wanted to do film, and I wanted to get a job with a production company that would help me, produce stuff, and would teach me. But every place I went, it was, "So, honey, what makes you think you want to get into movies?" And I would beg them to look at first it was a lifesaver, then it turned into a donut, my reel.
You
And I knew they would be embarrassed when they finally saw my work, because they
Yeah.
were making such idiots of themselves, talking to somebody that they thought didn't know what she was doing. And they said, "Oh, we'd love to produce for you," but that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, that's easy.
Yeah.
They wanted me to bring the work and to produce, but so I did a few others, but it never went anywhere, because I couldn't, Avedon had his own production company.
Mm-hmm.
If I could have afforded my own production company, then that's the way it should have been done.
Yeah. So going a little more technical, how did you learn to light, or where did you learn to light?
Well, interestingly enough, the photographer I worked for,
Mm-hmm.
um, my first lighting was lighting that he used, one light. I still use one light.
Yeah.
And my first light was something I made with my mother. I had an umbrella. I hate silver. I had an umbrella that was white on the inside. And I took white cheesecloth
Mm-hmm.
and I made a circle with a string on it and a slit. So it went around the light and around the umbrella and it tied.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my light. And I could pack it up and put it in my purse and take it on location.
Wonderful.
And it was a great light. I have portraits from when I was shooting for Bazaar. All my early work was done with that light. And then somebody made a light, guys had light banks, that they had built in the ceiling and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an amazing thing. Now, actually, Pro Photo has something very much like this light that I made.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing was, you had to change the cheesecloth often because it would get yellow. But
Yeah.
hey, cheese cost about 50 cents. So it was, yeah, that was my first light. Then when soft boxes came out, I tried those.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and the flowers are done with soft box.
Nice.
And I've made soft boxes. I've made things, yeah, with assistance. We've tried lots of different things.
Sure. Get out the foam core.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Call the set shop. Send me some foam core and
Right. Yeah. This was such a great neighborhood. I mean, this was the photo district.
yeah.
And all the stores were here, even um, even 42nd Street Photo and B&H, they were all here.
Yes.
That's why
Adorama's down.
after I directed, I said, I'm never going to buy another piece of equipment. Photographers are so stupid. Because when I directed, I just told the producer what I wanted.
Right.
And for 5 times the fee of a print photographer, I showed up and all I had to do was show up and direct.
Right. Everything is
And
rented in the
everything was
film
rented.
business.
Exactly. And I said, we're so stupid. So I after that, if I needed a lens, I'd go around the corner and get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Sure. You had
bought
Photo Care, Lens and Repro.
Alkit was
Yep. Wow.
really on my corner. Yeah. And the movie industry was across 19th Street on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
So all my Apple boxes and stuff like that would come from them. Yeah, this was the perfect neighborhood to yeah, and Jimmy Moore was across the street. He was one of my favorite photographers.
Wow.
He's one of the first photographers I had an interview with. And he looked at my portfolio and he said, who made these prints? And I said, I did. He said, I like them. Well, that was it. I'll tell you a story about how important it is for a young photographer or a young artist or a young anything to get positive feedback. One day, my favorite model, Donna Mitchell, and I were up near Bloomingdale's. She was getting makeup because she was going on a makeup campaign with Hero.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were up there and she said, I have to stop by at Hero Studio. So let's go. I said, I'm not going here. I'm not going. I mean, I was just starting, I'm not going to go to Hero Studio. No way. And she said, come on, he's not there. I said, I don't care. I'm not going. I'll be too embarrassed. Anyway, after much ado, I said, okay. And we go up in the elevator. The elevator door opens up. Donna, his Hero. There was a couch right in front of the elevator. So I stepped in and immediately did an about face and sat down, like burying myself. And I was sitting there and they're all like, hi, Donna. And they're all talking and gabbing and stuff like that. And then Hero says, who's that sitting on the couch? And Donna says, oh, that's Barbara Bordnick. Do you know Barbara Bordnick? And he says, Barbara Bordnick, why is she sitting on the couch? So I stood up, and to pay my respects. And I said, it's such an incredible thing to meet you. And he said, Barbara Bordnick, he says, you are a breath of fresh air in Harper's Bazaar. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Can you imagine? I mean, it was, it was, uh, it was everything.
Yeah.
It was absolutely everything. Better than Henry Wolf, who was picking on the pocket on my coat and said, "You'll never be a fashion photographer." And then, of course, I knew him later. He had no idea what he said to me. He had no idea that I was that person, and he loved me. Too
Hmm.
late, but yeah. But it's really, really important. And another thing is, no one has a right to tell someone what they'll never do.
Hmm.
No, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
you came up in a really tough time for women. I mean, it's.
it was really, really difficult.
Hmm.
My agent would come back and say, they said they used a woman last year. Can you imagine?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even in the 70s, my wife was going to school for music and wanted to become a composer, and they said, "No, you're a flute player. Women don't compose. They just play flute." And
Right?
it's like
Yeah.
amazing.
And then another time, um, my agent said, what did you worked with?" And she named an art director. I said, "I've never worked with him." She says, "Yeah, you have." I said, "No, I never forget people I worked with, especially back then when I could still remember." Um, she said, "No, you did." I said, "What makes you think that?" She says, "Because there's an art director who wanted to give you this campaign, but another art director said to him, 'She's got a mind of her own.'" Now, if when I was growing up, anybody said to me that if I was gonna have a mind of my own, it was gonna be a bad thing, right? But yeah, it was stuff like that. It was always, and then of course when I directed, that was my husband, who was fascinated by film. I had him come to the first shoot. I never had him come after that, because we would be at dinner. I'd be sitting there and we would all be at dinner and they would all say, "She did a great job today. You know, she's good. She's really nothing to me." They were
Hmm.
talking to him. It was like I wasn't even there. And
Yeah.
so I said, "No, this can't go on like this." And so that was the last time. But yeah, it was actually in America, there were no other women photographers. Well, what happened, the other photographer,
Sarah Moon, yeah.
was Sarah Moon was a model.
Hmm.
She's a good friend of mine. I love it. She's my favorite photographer. Um, and Deborah Turbeville was an editor.
Hmm.
So they all came, they were all very connected and they came from the industry, you know. But other than that, there was one photographer, one woman photographer who shall remain nameless, who imitated Helmut Newton.
Hmm.
And she got a lot of work, but it was so derivative. Um, in fashion, there was really nobody around for a long, long time. When I took my first photographs, there was not another woman in fashion.
Hmm.
There hadn't been in a generation. Lillian Bassman was like the last woman photographer, and she has children my age. So yeah, but it was, I women's organizations used to have me come, and they would want me to complain about how difficult it was and stuff, and they would tell me the trouble they were having, and I used to always say, "Look, we can concentrate on how difficult it is or how nasty some people are, or we can just go about it."
Hmm.
And I think it's a much better idea to just go
Just go
about it.
about it. Great.
Yeah.
Oh, look who's back. Mr. Newler.
Mueller,
And he's got his
we're in
ears.
trouble now. Yeah, we're in for trouble now.
Went,
How was your test, Mueller?
I don't know. I won't know till tomorrow at 9:30. But it was like it reminded me of Lamar's. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe out. Put me in a
Yeah.
room. Put me in a room. Close the door. I was looking for a fly. Remember that movie, The Fly?
Yes. Help me.
Wow.
Cool. Any other questions in the audience?
Yeah,
What did I
Barbara,
miss?
you mentioned that.
Ian.
Yeah, you mentioned that Dayton's was your favorite client. Why is that?
Um,
Peter.
the art director there was named Nancy Brown. And I would do, she would say, you can do whatever you want, whatever you want. And at first I didn't believe her. And I did this photograph it was nice. It was so conservative. And then I'll never forget, I did the photograph I showed from the store. I did, it was for a little handmade book that they gave out, because that was for the overalls, for all their couture stuff. And so I did these shots, and the shot, it was a beautiful shooting. And I sent her 3 choices of one of the photographs. I used to edit. I was always a very tough editor. And she called me up and she said, why did you send me 3? What? I don't need more than one. Which one? Now I have to decide between the 3. That's why I love them. When they said I could do anything, you could do anything you want, they meant it.
Nice.
And they totally supported me. It's interesting because you now know most of the really great projects I've done, I had no idea how to do until I got into them. Because of that, I realized that I function best when my client believes I can do something even more than I can. That's when I functioned the best throughout my career.
I think, Paula, did you want to raise your hand and ask something? Just, you're muted right now.
Yes, I do.
Paul and
There
Paula
you
first.
are.
Paula first.
Can you
Thank
hear
you.
me?
Thank you. Barbara, you're wonderful. I have, first of all, Mrs. Lovett was the character.
Yes, Mrs. Lovett. I can't believe I
Mrs.
couldn't
Lovett.
remember.
Yeah,
Yes, right.
okay. I saw her in it. It was just memorable. It was fabulous.
Right? Yeah.
I have to tell you, you are a fabulous artist. Fabulous. And you have the eye. And I feel when I'm looking at your paintings, see there, I said it, your photographs it's like you don't crop because that's the size of the canvas. It's rigid. You can't crop it. And everything is in camera. And I mean, you're an artist. You're a painter that takes photographs. That's what I feel.
Oh, thank you very
They're
much.
beautifully balanced, and it has the structure of a painting and the limitations of a canvas. I mean, they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
I'm doing a whole presentation for Moab Legion in 2 weeks, if you would be interested in seeing more.
Yeah, send me
Yeah.
that and I'll add it to the description here. Paul Bannon, you had a question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you. Barbara, you were living in New York and
yes.
you didn't carry your camera around. And
No.
that piqued my interest because I picked up a camera in 1980 and there were days where I was going about my business and something cool happened and I didn't have the camera. So I was punished. And then there were
Happens
days
all the time.
And then there were
Happens
days
all
where something really cool happened and I did have the camera, like this woman that turned out to be a guy that I was sitting with at a cafe. And I got the shot. So
Yep.
is that what went through? Is that what you went through?
Yes, I see things all the time that I say, that would be a great shot. But I'm
Yeah.
going to show you something if I can find it
Sure.
quickly, which is a photograph that I was ready. And it happens to be my favorite photograph, which is interesting. Let me see here. This is my favorite photograph,
Oh, that's so cool.
and it's because I was ready.
Wow.
Yes.
I was going on safari. We had just had lunch, and we went down the street, made a right turn, and I had my camera next to me. I was sitting next to the driver, and I looked in the side view mirror, and that's what I saw.
Yeah.
And normally I'd say, God, that would be such a great photograph, and just go on. But I yelled, stop! And he stopped the car, and I jumped out, and this was 2 frames. The second frame, it's gone. This is Kodachrome.
Wow.
This is Kodachrome. And it's my favorite photograph.
Was
that
this
I've ever
before or after you knew Jay Maisel? It sounds like a Jay story.
done. No, it's after I knew Jay. Was it? Yeah, Yeah. Yeah, it was. So that's one time that I was ready. Um, and there are times that I wish that, I'll be with um, an ex-boyfriend of mine was a painter, and we walked down the street, he would see everything, everything. And then I start to feel like I'm going blind, you know, um, because you really have to keep looking. You have to
Hmm.
keep seeing. Um,
That's really
but
important.
that was, yeah, I know, but that was never the only time the street and the landscape was important to me photographically was when I was looking for a location. If I
Hmm.
came upon something and I said, now I walk around with my phone and I take photographs of light situations and stuff like that. And I bought myself, when I was in business, when I was a photographer for 20 years, I bought myself a Leica because I thought every serious photographer should own a Leica. It was a nightmare because I was an SLR photographer and a rangefinder was torture. But it was a great camera to take when I used to go to Europe because it was small and I could
Hmm.
walk around the street. So I do things like that, but not if not if I have another. I don't, you know. uh, As I said, I was really close to Jay, and I went on. Jay and I went out shooting one day, and he shoots all the time. It's impossible to be with him. He's always shooting you. He's always photographing you. Um, so, but I could never do that. I For me, I guess a photograph was first of all, I was a fashion photographer, and fashion is about fantasy. Fashion um, is about something you would like to make, to see. And
Yeah.
so I was used to making my photographs,
Mhm.
creating this world.
Hmm.
Putting it
Um,
together.
and so it was, yeah, I wasn't really interested. In fact, there was a period when the magazines wanted, photojournalists, they wanted real people and they wanted real fashion. That never worked. But anyway, um, I used to always say, I'm not interested in what's going on in the street. I am much more interested in what I can make
Mhm.
happen in the street.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's really my approach, I guess.
Yeah, it's a difference
Yeah.
between finding photos and producing photos.
Yeah, and making photos. Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
exactly.
Barbara, I have a question. The voice is there. The image of that you shot of there's a church in a valley
Oh, yeah,
with
yeah. That's your favorite
my
image.
favorite image. Was that a grab
Yeah.
shot or was that set up?
No, no, that was set up.
Oh, okay.
That was
Never
set up.
mind.
Yeah, the stylist was the nun in that outfit. It's a photograph I did for actually for an annual report. It was in Germany, um, and there was we were trying to get this castle in the background, and I wanted it was for American Standard. American Standard happens to make brake linings for buses in Europe. So this was about that. So we were in a field and I wanted to have a nun in the old nuns costumes, those gorgeous things they used to wear, running across the field with a bunch of little kids in yellow slickers. And and that's the shot he's talking about.
It's
Nice.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful.
That was Ektachrome,
Hmm.
pushed to death.
Who cares? It's a beautiful shot.
Great. Well,
Thank
this has
you.
been wonderful. We really enjoyed this conversation. Does anyone else have some final questions? Or Barbara, do you have a final word you want to say? Jeff, you've been really quiet today.
Yeah.
Well, I've just been,
He's seen this before. He's seen a lot of this
Yeah.
before.
well, yeah, but I enjoyed listening to Barbara talk and tell stories and show her pictures. So I didn't want to interrupt. I've got funny Jay stories as well, but I have a question for you, John.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you sitting in?
An egg chair.
Oh, oh. I'm sitting there trying to figure out what the you know, everybody's got their own kind of like Zoom background.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm a photographer, so I have a photographic background. And I'm sitting there thinking, now,
I like your background.
thanks. And I'm thinking, what the hell is he background?
I knew what it was, John. I knew what it was.
Thanks.
Being married to an industrial designer, that's why I knew what it was.
Yeah, I
But,
decided to
no,
move down to the library.
Wait a minute,
Um,
and he rented that for this conversation. It's an
I-
age
but
share.
I
Haven't
find
you
it
guys
interesting,
seen that?
Barbara. I've also shot people with 8x10, and although a lot of mine were commercial, it wasn't fashion or portraits, but it is an interesting problem of trying to look. You know, you have the parallel problem. You're looking alongside the lens, trying to imagine what the lens is seeing, and trying to capture at the right moment. I just recently moved out of my studio, and I never realized how heavy 8x10 film was. I used to shoot a lot of stuff for Budweiser, and I would think nothing about shooting 50 or 100 sheets of 8x10 on a beer shoot, of which,
Yeah.
you know, maybe 2 or 3 were worth keeping. So I literally was going through all my old film, because I had to take a whole room worth of film storage and take it down to a single closet in my new studio.
That's my new
So I got rid of a lot of 8x10, and I kept putting these old 8x10 sheets of film in these bags, and the bags would rip because the film was so heavy. But it was interesting to think about the old days of view camera work.
Right.
You know, I'm halfway inclined. I kept my CNR, so I could actually shoot 4x5 or 8x10. And I've got a little area where I could process black and white film.
Right.
Although I wouldn't make black and white prints, I would scan the film. But I'm thinking of actually doing that, because there's
Do it,
something
Jeff.
Mhm.
there's something kind of retro about film.
Yep. Well,
But
I
anyway, I
think,
love watching, listening to you talk, and I really love your flower photos.
oh, thank you. Thank you. When I started doing flowers, I wouldn't tell anybody I was doing flowers, because I said, everyone's going to think I'm dying, you know, because everybody at the end of their life, every photographer at the end of their life shoots flowers. And so I wouldn't tell anybody. And then the guy that was head of the photo department at the new school, I invited him to dinner, and I said, I'd like to show you something. And it was a very dark restaurant. And so I opened up this box, and I was showing him these prints you could barely see. And he said, these are beautiful, Barbara. I said, really? Really? You really mean it? I mean, I just was so self-conscious, but I did know one thing. I knew I was not interested in shooting flowers commercially, because they were going to want the flower. So it had to be a book.
Mhm.
And that's how the books came about, really.
And those
as a
with
result of
Rizzoli?
that. Yeah. They wound up with Rizzoli. It was with Welcome Books.
Okay.
It was, yeah, Lena Tagore. Yeah. The thing about the 8x10, you know, I used to focus it in the back and set up the shot.
Mhm.
And then I would tell whoever was sitting in front of my lens what their workspace was. And I would say, you can move like this, but you can't move like this.
Mhm.
And that's how I got those photographs of Alberta and Betty Carter. They would laugh, we were talking and they were laughing, and they didn't go out of frames, out of focus. And
Yeah.
yeah, I have a portrait of Yip Harburg singing. He wrote Over the Rainbow. He wrote the lyrics for Wizard of Oz. I have a portrait of him singing Over the Rainbow to me. Yeah, that
Wonderful.
was, you know, that's the thing about photographers, and that's the thing about portraits, I think, too. And especially fashion photographers, because we always get interesting people to shoot when I was a fashion photographer. But the people that we meet, we're so lucky. We really are.
Mhm.
because we meet all these people that we photograph, and it's a very personal experience. I think it's an intimate experience actually for those moments.
So Barbara, all the flower pictures in all three of your books,
Mhm.
or whatever's coming, right? None of them are the individual pictures are, you don't sell them individually?
Yeah, I do. They're limited editions. The ones in the books are all limited editions. I just don't
Through
promote
who?
them.
Through you or an agent?
Through you, Mike. No, they're
Yes,
all,
many we talked
they're
about
for
that
sale.
earlier, of being
Yeah,
photographers are bad self-promoters.
Oh,
terrible,
yeah.
terrible.
But
You know, they were
seriously,
sold to galleries, but I'm not with a gallery.
so you're not with a gallery, you're not with an agent. Does anybody know you sell these things on your own?
Some people, not enough. I mean, they should be, um, they they should be perfect for places like Florida, California, and stuff like that. But I don't know. I'm when it comes to selling stuff, I'm really bad.
Maybe
I
we'll
mean, I
have
sold a lot of stuff when the books came out. I sold a
yeah.
lot of stuff when the books came out.
Mueller, we're going to have you on
That
for a show to talk about how to promote and sell. How's that?
I can't promote myself.
Okay.
I can't promote myself.
no, but you should have someone on that can do that.
You know, every, well, this is partly a Newlerism. Every single funeral parlor in the entire United States should be purchasing your images to hang on their walls in their offices, or at least some sort of a card to send out, or people to send out, saying, thank you, Uncle Joe was a nice guy, and thank you for your donation, whatever. They're
Why
just
on
sitting in a
earth
box,
funeral parlors? That's such a strange.
because everybody sends flowers to a funeral parlor. Well, except our tribe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, actually, no. Where they should be and where they are is in hospitals. They're perfect for hospitals.
Yeah.
And the books are perfect for hospitals. I used to fight with my publisher all the time that she should get them into hospitals, because I had several friends whose parents were terminal.
Hmm.
Not several. I had about 3 friends. That's not. It's more
Yeah.
than 2, but not
So
several.
these books are not in anymore, is that correct?
Are not what?
Not in print anymore, available in bookstores. They're
No,
only
they're not
only
anymore.
available through you now.
You can get them online sometimes secondhand, but you
Hmm.
can get the ones signed from me.
Okay.
No, they're in her basement.
No, they're in my darkroom. Yeah, they're $40 plus shipping. Yeah.
Great. Anyone else? Going once.
That
Okay.
Leica story was interesting. Did you find, and I heard you say that it was harder for you to work with, but did you find that the photographs were just different? Because when I used
Um,
Leica, they were different. They just stood out.
I didn't do anything. The photographs were actually very nice. Were they different? They were different because the lens was different. There were a lot of things that were different about it. But I wasn't necessarily shooting anything I loved. Um,
Hmm.
I didn't, I mean, I was shooting, I was in Paris, I was shooting lots of cats and windows, and those are my favorite photographs.
Yeah.
And actually, Sarah's husband used to do a calendar with animals for a nonprofit organization, and he bought one. But I didn't know enough about the camera to know the difference.
Mhm.
But you know about photographs, images, you understand them. So I thought maybe,
Yeah,
maybe it
it,
would have stood out.
no, because I didn't use it enough. I didn't,
Oh.
and it was difficult for me. So I couldn't really compare it, you know, it's not like it was apples and oranges in the
Oh.
experience.
Yeah.
The whole experience of it, you know, and then yeah, and focusing it was difficult because I was starting to wear glasses then. So it was, but I have it, and I keep threatening to take out my 4x5 camera,
Sure.
and I have a 4x5, 5x7 brand new Deerdorf, and my Leica.
Yeah, I
I keep
recently
threatening.
sold my 5x7 Deerdorf, but I still have some rail cameras 4x5s.
Barbara, did you say they're brand new?
Yeah, I mean, it
How
was
long
hardly
ago did
used
you buy them?
a long time ago, but they're hardly used. I think I used it about, if I used it 10 times, it would be a lot. I use the 8x10 a lot,
Wow.
but the 4x5, I hardly ever used.
Do you study painters?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I used to ski, and the ice skaters were a really good source of information. And the diving board was a great place to work out.
I did a story on Olympic skaters for Geo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in my other presentation too. Yeah.
So Barbara,
Yes.
I posted a couple of links in the chat. There is one link to a friend of mine, Henry Domke, who is a photographer. He's a retired physician, a doctor, and he lives in a prairie trust, which is a land trust in Missouri. And all he does is photograph like nature photography and flowers in particular. But what he does is he specializes in producing art for hospitals and waiting rooms and doctors' offices. And Henry, he does an enormous amount of work for these. He is one of the first people I've ever seen wear out printers. He prints so much canvas because he prints these in large canvas, and he
Right.
wore out two Epson 11880s. If you can imagine wearing out a Epson printer. But then the other link that I posted is Igor's link to his Facebook
That's
page.
the one on Facebook, right? That's the one
Yeah.
on Facebook.
That's the
And then the other one is Henry Domke. Okay.
yeah, that's the cat photographer with his girlfriend, partner, artist, and they're doing the book Cats.
Right.
So he does his photograph, and then she does her artwork, and they're putting a book together. A lot of his stuff, of course, he's Russian, so a lot of his posts are in Russian, but you can translate it and be able to read it. So,
Thank you.
and I really
Thank you very
like his work. Pardon?
I said, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I will send you those links afterward, Barbara, if you don't want to copy them out of
Okay.
the chat.
I just screen copied them.
Okay, good, good. Last couple of questions from Paul were, who are your favorite painters and what was your first paid photo shoot?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
My first paid photo shoot. Oh, yeah. My first paid photo shoot was a fashion shoot for a Visco Fibers, which appeared in the Sunday Times magazine with my favorite model.
Who is she?
And pardon, who is she?
Who is he?
Don't know. Who's
No,
she?
Yeah.
Donna Mitchell. She was the greatest model ever. She worked with all the great photographers, and she was fabulous. She knew what you wanted before you did.
Wow.
I was so nervous when she came to the studio because, you know, I mean, I figured she's not going to want to work with me. She was amazing. She was just amazing, and we worked together a lot. And what was the other question? I don't remember.
What are your favorite painters?
Oh,
I like Hopper.
oh yeah. Well, you mean classical painters? Absolutely, Hopper. I have a photograph I did in Russia that looks like a Hopper painting. because the light was like that. Of those photographers, of those painters, tons. Um,
Yeah, it's a
I
tough
also
question.
like, yeah, I also like the, it's interesting.
Impressionism.
Because I was thinking of contemporary painters,
Hmm.
and now we're going to get into my problem with names, because I have a horrible memory for names. Um, uh, he's a German painter. His work is phenomenal. Um, he did the paintings that look like photographs, that look like black and white photographs. His name starts with an A.
John Register or Chuck Close.
No, and I hate Chuck Close's 8x10 photographs.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's just because they're Chuck Close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But oh God, it's escaping me. But anyhow, the classical painters. I mean, I love the Impressionists. The Impressionists were a huge influence on me when I started. And as far as photographers were concerned, the pictorialists were my favorite photographers. The photosecessionists.
Hmm.
They were
Before the F-64 folks, huh?
right just before the F-64 folks. Right.
Yeah.
I love because they look like fashion photographs.
Hmm.
I mean, their whole concept was to not look like photography. Do anything to make your photographs not look like photography.
Yeah.
Because people would try, because the camera was accessible, and so everybody was using it. It's the same problem. The problem, it's really funny because when the small camera came out, I teach the history of fashion photography and I teach the history of photography. When the small camera came out, everybody, the 8x10 photographers, the view camera photographers thought it was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And we're going to lose all our clients, right? And then when digital came out, photographers panicked. And now, with the phones and everybody taking pictures all the time, what happens is that's when fine art photography gets really heavy, because photographers try and find a way to separate themselves.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I
so
was looking for a book behind me called Paul Archer or Fred Archer on portraiture that was written in the 40s or early 50s, and he has a chapter in there about boys going off to war and everyone getting these little 35 millimeter cameras, and now everyone hangs out a shingle and everyone's a photographer. I mean, it's
right,
just
yeah,
keeps repeating.
exactly. Yeah, and now we're in the same situation with Instagram and tell the phones, and I want to learn how to use my phone. That's what I want to learn, because that I would like to use, but I'm
Yeah.
not very good at it.
All you have to do is put your finger in the little round hole and dial.
Okay, Nuller.
I think phones are great.
Hmm.
They take great pictures.
Yeah.
You guys probably heard about the story about the guy that was taking a photography class and lost his camera. So he went to the grocery store and bought a tube of Quaker Oats and made it into a pinhole camera, and he composed his pictures properly. And the teacher gave him good grades.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not?
It's
Absolutely.
not the equipment.
The equipment that we all use are nothing but tools. They're tools. Once the image is created and printed or shown on a screen or TV or whatever, nobody says, oh, what camera, what lens, what aperture, what shutter
They're
speed,
photographers.
what film. I mean, it really is a bunch of BS. I have to say that I was part of that. All right. But if you remember, Barbara, and whoever else was part of the group that's still online, I always said that this has got nothing to do with the product. So you don't have to stand there and say, this is the best. Talk about your photography. Unfortunately, that changed years and years later. Not by me, but by
the first book that's behind John. The first Searchings book was done with the D30 camera. It was done with the very first single lens single lens reflex
Yeah.
camera, and you couldn't possibly tell when you look at that book. It's no different from the other two books. The only problem was that people have these huge mega mansions now, and they have huge walls, so they want gigantic prints. I always loved small prints. I always loved the prints that made you move in close to see
Yes.
them. I have a print, you can probably see a tiny little square in that.
Yes.
That's a photograph by Dorothy Norman. Do you know who Dorothy Norman was? Dorothy Norman was Stieglitz's woman after Georgia O'Keeffe.
Hmm.
And so she learned how to take photographs. And that photograph, it's a tiny little thing. I don't know what size it is, the size of the negative. 2 inches by 3
Yeah, it looks like
inches or
2 by 3 or so.
and it's a photograph of Stieglitz's desk with the old phone on it, the one that looks like a whatever, the cord attached. And I got it at an auction because I thought a photographer should own it. It has so much history in
Wow.
it.
Well,
The
Barbara,
most-
I'll tell you a little secret. There is some software, the Topaz Gigapixel. You can easily upsample 200%. And if the original image is good, you can upsample 400%. And those,
Really?
yeah, those early D30 images, because I've got a bunch as well, you could easily make those into 2024, somewhere around in that range. And then the other thing is that one of the tricks that I have is you upsample a lot, sharpen, and then you add photo grain, because then it makes you end up seeing
Yeah.
the grain a little bit instead of blurry image.
Pixel. Yeah.
So your flowers would
send me that?
upsample
Did you
huge.
put that in?
Yeah,
Did you
that's
put
no, that's Topaz software.
that?
At the Red of Texas, I just bought Studio 2.
Hmm.
It's really very good.
Okay, here it is. Well, I've got a lot from this.
Good. We did too.
You know, I wanted to find out why everybody was making such huge prints, like
I
Barbara
just
said.
told you why.
No, wait a minute. And so I went back in time to see how big were the paintings of the most famous artists. I don't think any of them are any bigger than 11 by 14. And most of them, like the Mona Lisa, it's a little thing.
Yeah,
I mean, but if
But,
you go
you know-
through the Met, I mean,
Yeah, I
you're
was
going to
just
see
gonna say
paintings of all different sizes. Like there's some El Grecos that are gigantic,
right.
that are really
Van
wonderful.
Dyke,
Hmm.
yeah, huge.
Blue Boy, there's some paintings that are just immense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's
but-
more.
yeah,
But there's more of this size
Hmm.
than there is of that size.
Oh, I think it's a matter
Well,
of what the artist envisions.
Yeah, and
Had
what
more
the
to do with
subject
how much.
do.
It had more to do with how much money the artist had to buy the medium that he or she was painting on. And a lot of cases, like I want to say,
No, it had to do with who
Monet
they-
or Degas.
Who
Degas.
hired them?
But
Exactly, it had to
no,
do with what the
Degas,
commission was.
Degas, his brother was giving him money to buy all sorts of medium. He couldn't
Yeah.
afford it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's what the artist envisions, and of course, certainly the availability of finances.
Yeah, who's commissioned the
Yeah.
painting?
Now, of course, Avedon, first show, the Marlborough show. I was just reading his biography. He walked into the gallery before he was showing, met the owner, and walked up to a wall, a blank wall, within a couple inches of his face and squinted and turned to the gallery owner and said, "I don't want to see people having to do this anymore." And Avedon then produced a huge
Right.
prints. One was like 8 foot by 30.
Sure, that was the Warhol team, and then he did the Chicago 7.
Right.
Right.
You know, and
Right.
they had 3,000 people of all sorts of celebrities and museum directors and
show
so
at the
on
Met
show
was
up
the
for
same
that
thing.
opening.
What was that, Barbara?
His show at the Met was the same thing.
Yeah.
His big show. Have you read the article on Avedon in Vanity Fair? There's a really interesting article in Vanity Fair about Avedon and Lillian Bassman. They were very good friends.
Mhm.
When Avedon and his wife and Lillian Bassman. It's a really interesting story because it's at a time. It's interesting. It's just really interesting, and you will learn things you absolutely did not know.
Is that recent?
Yes, it's in the current Vanity
Oh,
Fair.
okay, yeah, because there's
I
a
can
few
send it to you. I can send it to you
Yeah,
if you want me
that'd be
to.
wonderful, because I think there's a new book out also on Avedon.
Yeah, that's the one I've just started reading.
Who wrote it? Is it a picture book or a
No, it's a biography. Hold on, I'll tell you.
biography? I read the other one by Norma.
Yeah, the 800-page one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too. Did you get to see the Irving Penn retrospective a couple of years ago at the Met?
Yep.
That
It was
was
amazing.
yeah, that was great because one of his
Now,
last assistants, Billy, met us there to give us a kind of a personal tour of the
that must
work.
have been fabulous. Yeah. You know, ASMP, when I was president, ASMP wanted to give him an award. You know, the photographer, whatever we called it, the
Hmm.
photographer lifetime achievement. And so I called him and he came to the phone and I explained, I said, Mr. Penn, I'm president of ASMP and we would like to give you a lifetime achievement award. And he said to me, I don't accept any awards. I'm sorry. He said, that's very, very nice of you. And I appreciate it very much, but I don't accept any awards. Well, you can imagine my heart sank.
Hmm.
However, I said to him, I said, well, I'm really sorry about that, but you'll get it anyway. You just won't take it. I said, I'm really sorry that you won't come to take it, but let me ask you, if there was anything you would like to say to photographers, what would that be? And he said to me, tell them to stop giving awards and make sure their work is in print. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, make sure there's a
Wait a
print.
minute, say that again?
Stop giving awards and make sure your work is in print.
Cool.
It was amazing. Yeah.
So, Ian, did you get that?
Yes, the author is Philip with one L, Gefter, Gefter, and it's a biography of Richard Avedon, What Becomes a Legend Most. And it's brand new. It is available on Amazon and in print and Kindle.
Ian, the same author did the Vanity Fair article,
Oh,
Art,
really?
Fashion, and Sex, Avedon's Bohemian Coming of Age by
Yeah.
Philip Gifter. So
Very good, thank you.
Philip Gefter
Yeah. It's a great
on
article.
Avedon.
Someone sent it to me. I got Vanity Fair, but I
Mhm.
hadn't seen it yet. Someone sent it to me and said, did you know this?
So,
And
Barbara, my last question to you, is there anyone you'd like to see on these conversations?
you have to send me a list of who you've done
Okay.
and let me, I don't want to start naming names and you say we've done it. And
No,
let me see if I can add some, add someone.
sure. I know Michael Newler is mumbling Sarah Moon under his breath there. I can
Yeah, lots of
hear
luck.
that.
She won't do
I'd
it.
like to see Jay.
You haven't, Jay hasn't been here?
No, we haven't done Jay yet.
Oh, see, he would have been the first one I mentioned, but I assumed you must have had him.
No, actually, Newler keeps telling me that I should have you and Jay come on and do a point counterpoint.
that's his fantasy, you know, get over it.
Okay.
But no, but you should definitely have Jay because
Okay.
he's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
He's so intelligent. He's quick yeah. And
Great.
he's getting old, so have him. And he
And
doesn't
he
have to go, he doesn't have to go anyplace.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he'll say yes.
Have him
he
and
has
Dwayne
done a
Michaels.
couple of,
know what?
he
You know
has
what?
done a couple of
Dwayne.
Zooms.
What was that, Jeff?
He has done a couple of Zooms, but
Okay.
his assistant, Jeffrey Chong, has to set it all up.
Sure. I know Jeffrey, or I've met him at least.
Yeah, that's who
Tell
you want
Jay-
to contact.
Tell Jay that I said that you should call him. I said he should do it.
Okay.
And for sure, he's going to say, tell her, tell me if she shows up too.
Tell him that I said I thought he'd be wonderful. And so now you're obliged to ask him.
Okay. What
Yeah,
about
just tell
Dwayne
him I-
Michaels?
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
Dwayne would be great.
Okay.
I have to warn you because I thought of Dwayne and I was going to mention him to you. He's just down the street. We have coffee and soup and lunch from time to time.
What is
He's
he, homeless?
extraordinary. Pardon?
He's homeless? He's down the street?
And he hardly homeless. He owns a brownstone.
No, I
down
know, I know,
Yeah.
I know, I know, I know.
Anyway, I warn you because he's doing video now. He's not interested in talking about his print work anymore because he comes and visits my portrait class and shows videos and they get so upset.
Yeah,
I
he
can't
did that. He was at Palm Springs Photo Festival last year and showed a lot of
Did you
his
see the
videos.
video? Yeah, did you see them?
Yes.
Did you like them?
Some of them were a little out there. You know, it was the
Yeah,
end of a
his
long
work is-
day watching them. So,
But understand that,
His
that the
work-
cover,
Excuse me, Mike, I'm talking.
oh,
It's his work is it's out there, but his work he lost his partner after
Mhm.
many years, and the last years of his life, Dwayne took care of him, and so he didn't. So it's like this is his free time, and he's how old is he?
he's
think-
89 or 90.
Yeah, and I think he's 90 or 92 or something like that.
Okay.
So, so he does whatever he wants. He's painting now. Every week I get something from him.
Nice.
He's extraordinarily talented. And it's just that people might not understand his videos. They're very autobiographical. Some of them are hilarious. He has one video. Did you see? No, you couldn't have. When we got locked down, he did a video. He went out in the street dancing down Park Avenue and did a video with his mask on and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, but absolutely. Tell him again.
Yeah.
You can say that I thought he'd be terrific.
Great.
And you
Well,
can tell
thank-
him that
Sorry, Dwayne Michaels is doing a artist presentation today with Princeton University Art Museum, 5:30 Eastern Time.
Is it online?
Yes.
I mean, here,
he had a show.
I don't know
at
if
the
people
Morgan.
even remember this series of books.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He had a show at the Morgan Library that was absolutely gorgeous, exquisite. And they gave him, they didn't give him, they chose artifacts to go with his show it was so beautiful. It was so very beautiful. Yeah. And he is so funny.
this Zoom,
I just looked this
presentation
up and the artist talk with Dwayne Michaels scheduled for today at 5:30 has been postponed.
Uh-oh.
Don't know
They
why.
don't say why?
Now, Dwayne is not from the UK.
No,
Anyway,
he's from Pennsylvania.
yeah.
He's
I
from
want to thank
Pittsburgh.
you all. This has been really wonderful. I mean, we've gone almost 2 hours here. This is one of the longest conversations we've had, and it's been absolutely great.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Barbara.
much, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
John. Fuck
Yes,
you,
thank
Noor.
you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
This
Yes.
was a very big deal.
And we'll post a recording of this on YouTube later today, so tell your friends who missed it. So next week I got Paul Baraban and Eric Joseph from Freestyle. So look forward to seeing you there. And then November, we've got a few coming up. So keep watching. Thank you.
John. You're
Be well.
terrific. You
Be
too,
well.
everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody be
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Be well, Michael.
I appreciate that.